Being here, please welcome comedian Shapiro. Up next, free market campaigner from the right-wing think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs, Ruth Porter is with us. At just 27, he's the youngest SNP MSP, which means he's a Scottish National Party member of the Scottish Parliament. Therefore, he is definitely Scottish. Humza Yousaf is with us tonight. Finally, Catholic journalist and social media commentator Milo Yiannopoulos. But let's move on now and talk about higher education. University applications are down nearly 10% in England, and our exclusive free speech poll shows that 72% of young people believe tuition fees, which triple next month to nearly £9,000, are to blame. Well, no such drop-off here in Scotland, where university education is still free if you're Scottish, not if you're English. But 57% think going to university is worthwhile and the benefits outweigh the costs wherever you live. Well,
given the current economic climate, many young people today are considering the worth of higher education. What did the panel think?
Ruth, let's come to you first on this. Is it worth it?
Well, those two stories were awesome, and I think they demonstrate really what is central to this, that we're all completely different. And one of the things which is a big shame when it comes to this issue is that we've become obsessed with this idea that somehow going to university is what makes you educated. And I think increasingly that's an incredibly outdated way of looking at education. When you look at the impact of technology, you look at the scope of the media, you look at the changing face of communications, of social media, the way that we access information and the ability that we have to learn, I think it's quite outdated to focus so heavily on university to concentrate on that. But there is still a place, I think, obviously for some people and for certain skills in terms of going to university. But I think, again, we've got a system where there's a massive focus on these standard 3-year, 4-year in Scotland degrees, undergraduate degrees, where you have a massive long summer holidays, a short Christmas, a short Easter, as if somehow that standard format is going to suit every single area. And I think we need much more diversity in the way that universities delivered.
Well, interestingly, your power bar went shooting up to the top during that little monologue there. Meanwhile, Shabby, you were looking slightly nonplussed, I think.
No, I was just imagining a scenario where a young person goes for a job interview and says, I haven't got a degree, but I've spent loads of time on the internet.
But you can understand Ruth's point, though, that there's more than one way to get an education.
I think that is a little bit of a cop-out attitude that we are now having towards education. I think what we're saying is, it's OK, little people who don't have the money or the parents who went to university, you can read other little comic books, perhaps, things that will make you feel like you're more educated. It's such an important thing that we take this issue seriously, because this will go on for generations. We've got to see beyond the financial crisis and see what values we are now instilling in our culture, where we are saying that only certain people can go to university. Because what we are doing then, you see, we have a free healthcare. Healthcare is as important as an education, because there, if you're educated, if you have a degree, formal education is the biggest factor of social mobility. And this matter is a matter, like so many others in this country, about class. What we are saying is that we think that this formal education is only suited to certain people in certain sections of society. And then the question of money comes up. We're in a financial crisis.
Someone has to pay for everyone to go to university.
Listen, I'm not an economist, right? But I'm just thinking, get George Osborne, right? Tip him upside down, give him a little shake, and let all that change roll into the coffers of council estate kids and pay for their education, because they have as much right to go to as people from Eton and Westminster. This is massively an issue about class, in my opinion.
OK. Michelle.
You seem to have someone who's in agreement with you. Robin puts it nicely. She says that surely it's a bad thing if people are academically restricted by cost rather than intellectual ability. Seems to be your point there. And Giacomo said, I learnt practical media skills at Roundhouse London for £20 a terp, sorry. Then on my media degree, worth a thought.
OK,
sure is.
Definitely worth a thought. Well, let's talk about this then. The question is of cost, and Shappy saying that everyone needs education. Maybe it's almost the only way. But, Nick, you have an example of the fact that perhaps it's not just about going to university, right?
Yeah, I mean, For myself, I left school. I was running a business while I was at school. I then went on to university while I was running that business, and then dropped out of university because I was doing a business degree, and most of the things that I felt I was learning at uni, I was learning at a pace that was set by the class. Whereas if I can go out into the real world, run my business and go full steam ahead with it and learn from the mistakes I'm making, from the experiences I'm getting put through, then that's what I was going to do.
I think university is the real world. I think it is the real world, and it's brilliant that you've done what I did. I have a friend who was a musician and went to university, but his band took off, so he left. That's an exception, and you've brilliant that you're doing so wonderfully, but it is...
Is it everything, though, university? Is it not part of the way of...
It should be offered to everybody for free. You get a 16-year-old that has to make that decision. I know that you have years to pay it off, etc., etc. A 16-year-old that thinks, 25 grand? Am I going to put my parents through that? They're going to be put off.
I think it's important here, though, to... And this is something that actually makes me a bit angry. It's something that's happened with the discussion of tuition fees, and it's partly a political play. In some bits of the media, there's been this campaign to scare people about tuition fees. Now, this is a horrible tragedy, because what happens is it breaks down the meritocratic element of the education system. It's persuading and pushing people from underprivileged backgrounds who are more than intelligent enough to go to university, and scaring them off. And the reality is, you don't pay it back until you're earning a certain amount of money. After 30 years, it evaporates. You know, it's not a horrible, onerous commitment if you get a good job at when you graduate, and if you don't get a good job when you graduate, you don't pay it. What's been a horrible betrayal of young people from underprivileged backgrounds has been, sorry to say, the left-wing press, which should stick up for these people, scaremongering about tuition fees. You have to lay some of the blame for the nosediving applications at a press that continually reminds people how scarily expensive it is to go to education. The reality is, if you come from an underprivileged background and you manage to get into Oxford or Cambridge, £9 a year is a brilliant deal.
Well, you're putting an economic... I'm so sorry, but I feel so strongly about this. I'm really sorry about this. This almost makes me want to cry. What you're saying is it's about money. What we are telling young people is that it costs to get an education. I tell you what, to my dying day, I would chant what I chant as a student. Education is a right, not a privilege.
So maybe, Humza, the answer is people have to pay for it, but we've got to keep the cost manageable. Is that...
No, I mean, I entirely agree with what Shapiro was saying. I mean, you as a fundamental principle, education is absolutely a right and should be free. This idea of blaming the left-wing press for it, I mean, it's just absolutely ludicrous. I mean, people will be totally put off, be you from an underprivileged background or be you, as it's called, the squeezed middle. You'll be put off because, at the very least psychologically, there's already a barrier there before you even start work. And this excuse, this excuse about, look, we don't have enough money in the coffers, there's no money, the tough times in the economy, it's recession. You can't say on the one hand you don't have enough money and on the other hand manage to find £100 billion to renew nuclear Trident missiles. You can't say there's not enough money in the coffers and then say... No, you can't say...
free when the English taxpayer pays for Scottish...
Oh, well, that's
Scottish children. Pays for Scottish children to have free university education.
Because in Scotland we pay 9.6% of a tax, but we only make 8.4% of the population. So actually we pay our own way and we pay it pretty damn well. It's genuinely an issue of priorities for government. Look, the Scottish Government's priority was to make education free for those that it has an interest over and those whose interest it has to protect, i.e. the Scottish people. Now, it has that duty. If the UK Government doesn't want to prioritise education, that's entirely up to them, but they should expect to be punished for it in the next ballot paper.
It's not just a question of priorities, though, is it? It's also a question of how do you make higher education more affordable. And the current idea that we have this standard degree, it's not the way of making it affordable. If you look at doing things like, but it's not good value for anyone. Someone is still paying for this, be it the taxpayer or the person who goes.
If you have things... All you do is don't spend that £100 billion on Trident. You close down that £25 billion legal tax loophole.
Why do we not have more
to
part-time degrees? Why do we not have more options where you can go? And rather than having a long summer holiday, you can work work really intensively and you can get it done in 2 years.
I'll tell
We
you.
need a whole range of different options so that people have got choices.
I need to say something, if I may. First up, Milo, really, if you want to discuss about the how come Mickey Mouse economics, why don't we go gunning after the people who don't pay their tax, the very, very wealthy people who do not pay their tax. And also, I'm going to put this idea out there that I'm hoping some of you will agree with, that education and a degree in a university, that time you spend, is not all about getting a job at the end of it, particularly if you do an arts degree, which is so crucial.
Right, completely on that point.
And
And
we
I
need
have some
to-
sympathy with this argument about free education because you're absolutely right, particularly in an environment where most graduates don't come out to jobs. The really great thing about university is the opportunity it gives you to flourish intellectually.
Well, let's okay. And looking at the power bar, Milo, why do you think it is that you're slipping behind slightly?
I don't know. I don't
do
know.
you think?
I think it might be that thing about
Insulting the whole of Scotland,
Yeah.
That might be...
Yeah, that might have something to do with it. OK, think. Same-sex marriage. It will be legal in Scotland by 2015, and England may not be too far behind with legislation either. But religious leaders have objected to the proposals and claim they haven't been listened to. So let's find out what our audience have to say. Where is Emma? Emma, fire away.
Do you believe that religious bodies are being marginalised by the introduction of equal marriage in Scotland?
OK, Milo, let's come to you.
Well, I think, you know, marriage is not exclusively a religious institution. It's not exclusively a secular institution. I do think it's important to listen to what the churches have to say, and here's why. Because this was quite a cynical marketing ploy by David Cameron, this gay marriage thing, you know, we, as a gay man, you know, I'm not particularly interested in it, I don't want it. You know, I would already have all of the rights and responsibilities available to me through civil partnership. I find it quite patronising that David Cameron would use gay people as an electoral weapon. What worries me, if it goes through, which is what will inevitably happen, is someone's going to challenge this in the European Court of Human Rights. In fact, gay activists have already said they're going to do it, to try and force churches to conduct gay weddings. When that happens, and you've got imams who are told you, if you have, you know, you have to perform gay weddings if you want to do marriages at all. You know, when you have Catholic churches and Church of England churches padlocking up because they, you know, they simply can't accept this, then you precipitate a war between special interest groups, which was completely avoidable. It was totally unnecessary for us ever to have this brinkmanship, which will happen. The other problem is simply a practical one. Given that nobody really wants it, nobody's asking for it, and it doesn't matter. Why inflate? Well, it doesn't matter. We already have civil partnership. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. It's just a word. Yet this word is...
Words are important.
Yet this word is triggering rows. And if you look at the countries where gay marriage has been introduced, like Spain, look at the incidence of homophobic violence that follows immediately. It's not right. But given that there's no real advantage, there's no upside to introducing this, and given that it was only an electoral tool by David Cameron in the first place, do we want to willingly kick that off in our own country? I don't think so. And as a gay man, I couldn't be less interested in it. I don't want it. I don't need it. I don't know why we're having a discussion about it.
OK, Shappy, you say words are important. Is the word equality not quite important?
As a gay man, I would say... Listen, it's so simple. This situation is black and white. Do we want equality or not?
We have equality.
No, you don't. We don't. We don't have equality.
Civil partnership's better. You don't get the religious baggage. I mean, I say this as a Catholic journalist who does believe in these things, but
you know what the thing
for
is,
people who don't believe, you don't have any of that
baggage. Do you know
baggage.
what you're like for me, Milo? You know, as a gay man, as a Catholic person, you're like that one Asian guy they'll bring along that wants to join the BNP. Right? Yes.
When people run out of arguments, they do tend to get personal. Do carry on.
You know. Look, if you legalise something...
I think the poor lover's derailed. Should we move
But
on?
can you understand, though, it's rather confusing that as a gay religious man, you don't believe...
It's super simple. I don't want to be patronised by something I don't want, I don't need, that nobody's asking for, and I don't want to precipitate a war between the churches and gay people, and I don't want to trigger homophobic violence. All of those things are going to happen. That's why I don't want it. I don't understand what's confusing about this.
So in order to not trigger off racial violence, you're saying that I shouldn't marry a white guy?
No, it's entirely different.
And move to somewhere else.
You're saying that this is completely black and white, but the point is the
Equality
government is balancing very carefully different people's freedoms and rights.
I understand that.
Surely the fact that there is such a high risk that the European Court would force religious organisations that did not want to conduct same-sex marriage ceremonies.
what about the
Until
millions
we
of-
can find a way around that, that is a problem.
May I just make my point a bit clearer? I understand what you're saying. It's because I haven't explained myself yet. What I think happens is we have to force our culture to catch up with what I think the majority of people want regarding homosexuality as natural and equal. When we legalise something, even if the religious institutions can't implement it, if the law says this is natural and normal, which it is, then eventually it'll be the religions that will have to catch up. They will be the ones who are abnormal.
Okay.
I think that's an important thing.
Okay.
If they can't implement it, I mean, it's hard to force them, but...
Humza, Scotland are leading the way on this. Are you proud of that?
Yeah, well, I think actually the argument itself centres around... I mean, it's a difficult debate. I mean, it absolutely is, and it's not an easy one to have. And, you know, there's a lot of courage being shown by those who have decided to take it forward. But the argument is about religious freedom. And for me, it centres entirely around religious freedom. So those that don't want to do it should absolutely, unequivocally be protected from not doing it. And that should be on the face of the bill. It should be through the Equalities Act, and that should be given. And that, from the Scottish Government perspective, that equality, that reassurance is given. Let me finish the point. But the point is, for me, religious freedom always cuts both ways. So look, I'm a practicing Muslim. I'm fasting today, so I've got another hour or something to go before I can eat, right? So I'm practicing, and for me, okay, whatever my views may be, or whatever my mosque's view might be, that shouldn't impinge upon Quakers, upon those who follow the Metropolitan Church, upon the Reformed Jews who want to practice same-sex marriage. Look, I don't drink alcohol. I've never touched a drop in my life. That doesn't mean I want to start to ban communion where wine is drunk in all these chapels. That just wouldn't make sense. So to me, this is it's an issue about religious freedom. Protect those who don't want to do it, but don't do it at the expense of those who believe it's their religious right.
OK, so Humza says it's about religious freedom. You can see his power bar is shooting up towards the top with those comments. Michelle?
The power bar's loving it. Tulu says, I'm not homophobic, but as a Christian, I don't believe in same-sex marriage. It's against my beliefs, and I shouldn't be persecuted or attacked for having my own opinion.
Did someone go around and attack this person?
Actually, well, you know, that sort of glibness and aggressiveness is typical of something that, you know, religious people do experience. They do feel like they can't express their views. So,
OK,
you know, without
let's get into the audience, Shappy. We're going to dive into the audience, because we are here for them primarily. Far away.
Haven't the churches been offered an exemption, so they have been listened to in this case? Milo, you said a civil partnership's very, very similar, and it's only the case of a word. If it is so similar, what's the big deal in just changing it and accepting it?
It's actually legally identical. First of all, you can build in those protections, but they're meaningless at a country-by-country level, because we have this overarching umbrella of the European Court of Human Rights, which can overrule any of those, because it can rule them to be illegal. The European Court of Human Rights can rule such clauses in law to be illegal and overturn them. That's precisely what's going to happen. To your question, it is identical. It is a word. It doesn't really matter, except to some people, and to those people, it is, you know, it is an important concept.
OK.
And the problem is it's going to precipitate tensions. You know, freedoms for different groups, whether they're religious or various kinds of minorities, do butt up against each other, and you have to make a judgment of which trumps which.
Thank you. Nathan, is it important to you?
Yeah, it's absolutely important to me. And I think, to pick up on what Milo said, it's not just a word. And as religious bodies have said over and over again throughout this debate, marriage is an institution. And at the moment, it's an institution that people are excluded from purely on the basis of their gender identity and sexuality. And that's absolutely not equality.
Well, they're not excluded from the state definition. They're not excluded because we have civil partnership, and it's the church's right to exclude you if it doesn't consider gay marriage to be appropriate.
Yes, but it's also the church's right, when they want to conduct same-sex marriage, to be able to go on and do so. And let's just correct some legal issues here. The European Court has absolutely no power to overturn the UK.
Well, let him make his point. Let him make his point, man.
That isn't true.
Yes, it is. They can issue a statement of incompatibility. They cannot overturn our laws. As we can see, the UK government have continuously been told by the European Parliament to allow prisoners to vote, and David Cameron has refused to do that. So we can quite clearly see that they have no power to overturn our laws. And we have said over and over again throughout this campaign that we do not want to force anybody to conduct same-sex marriage. This is about religious freedom for those bodies that want to conduct it to do so. And also it's about secular institutions to be able to conduct same-sex marriage. And that is an institution that I am a gay person in a relationship with a man I'm excluded from at the moment.
OK, Nathan, thank you very much for that. Michelle, a couple of points online?
Yeah. You've got some support here, Milo, with Jake. He says, as a gay man, I have never believed in gay marriage. Civil partnership is the same, and we get our own name for it.
Exactly. We have better than marriage. We've got our own special, special treatment.
But that's not enough for you, is it, Nathan? You want more. You have a civil partnership, you want to be married,
We've got
don't
more
you?
than marriage. We've got, better than regular people have. We've got our own special, custom, bespoke, brilliant institution just for us. What's the problem?
Because that's not equality. When the government has to create a special institution for a special group of people, that is not equality. That says that I'm not equal to the other group of people.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Because, of course, we are here in Scotland, we're here in Edinburgh, we're live at the moment, and the hottest political debate around here is the question of independence. Now, drop in and see them, but back on with the debate. Julie.
Do you think that the recent success of Team GB has had an adverse effect on the SNP's chances of being successful in the independence referendum?
Right, Humza, this is made for you.
No, I mean, first of all, I think comedians should rule the world rather than politicians because their answers were a lot better. But going to the Olympic point, I don't think actually the Olympics will matter a jot because that's not really what fundamentally the issue is about. Look, the idea of independence is not about taking a chainsaw down to the border of England and cutting and casting Scotland off into the North Sea. It's not about flag-waving, kilt-wearing, shortbread-eating, romanticised Braveheart nationalism. For the record, all things I quite like doing, by the way, sometimes even at the same time. But the point is that's not what independence is about. I enjoyed the success of Mo Farah, Jessica Ennis and Chris Hoy just as much as anybody else did. I believe in the shared values and shared history. That doesn't change just because you want to transfer powers and you believe that powers should be transferred from London up to Scotland, that we should take care of our own corporation tax, economy, defence and so on and so forth. Because fundamentally and simply, put independence is about that. It's about the fact that all decisions about Scotland should be made by those who care the most about the interests of Scotland, and that, by definition, is the people of Scotland. No, I don't think it will matter.
Can you relate to that, Milo? Do you agree?
Oh, well, look, I mean, I'll keep it brief when I realise I'm going to completely give up any hope of having any power bar left by the end of this answer. But I think it's hilarious that Scotland thinks it can go independent. And if you really think you can survive on your own, jettison yourself off to be an economic power the size of Iceland, then good luck to you.
See, it's this idea that, you're not worth anything, you can't survive on your own, but we really, really want to keep a hold of you, you know? I mean, it's just doesn't seem to...
I didn't say I did. I didn't say for a second that I was...
That's not the relationship I was in.
I didn't say for a second that I was keen on keeping Scotland. I don't really care one way or the other, but I just think it's funny that Scotland thinks it can do it.
OK, Michelle?
Quite funny there, isn't it? Thomas says independence for Scotland would be stupidity at the least. And Alex says, yes, it would be good for them, but bad news for everyone else in the UK.
OK, right, where's Scott? I want to hear from Scott, who got involved on our website and wrote a blog for us. Where? Scott, excellent. What inspired you to get online, start sending messages and tell us what you think, Scott?
Well, for me, it's this kind of idea that people seem to think that people are against the idea of independence for Scotland, don't think Scotland could cope on its own. I mean, I do think Scotland could cope on its own, but I don't see why you'd want to throw away the seat at the top table UN Security Council, the security of jobs, pensions, business within the UK. I don't understand why you'd want to throw away that when you can keep that and still be a present world power. We're leading the way on gay marriage, we led the way on smoking ban. We've done things within the UK and I still think we could continue that within the UK. And I just don't understand why you'd want to throw away the kind of security we've got from the UK.
What do you gain? What's gained?
I think you articulate your point well, but look, see all those successes that you talk about that we've had, that's because we've controlled those powers up here in the Scottish Parliament. I don't buy this idea that we have, have this place at the top of the Security Council, at the top table. Scotland doesn't have influence. You can't have less influence than zero. Look, Scotland, for example, completely and utterly, overwhelmingly, 2/3 of our population was against the Iraq War. And it was somebody murdered, actually, across the UK. But Scotland was vehemently opposed to it. Yet our sons and daughters had to go out and fight in illegal conflicts. That's not influence. You can't have less influence than zero. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. We've had a lot of success. But those successes have been with the powers that we've had in the Scottish Parliament. Why should we not replicate that by controlling our own economy, our own defence, our own immigration? Well, the referendum will be in 2 years' time because there's a lot of questions to be answered.
Why so long? I mean, that's the mandate you got elected on. You did well. Why no referendum?
Well, the mandate,
do you actually really believe it at all? Was it just a power grab?
The mandate was also because it was the last 2 hours.
Dems, or?
Now who's being delivered?
No, I'm asking. Well, a party that has really one mandate, it gets in power and it doesn't call a referendum. It doesn't make sense to anyone.
The mandate during the election was in the second half of the Scottish Parliament, so that will be the second half of it. But I think the point that's made in the audience is, look, whether you're for it or whether you're against it, I don't doubt even those that are against it I don't doubt your intentions. I mean, we all want what's best for Scotland, absolutely undoubtedly. But what I don't like is this argument that Scotland can't survive on its own. I find that extremely patronising. You've got £1 trillion of an oil asset base, 25% of Europe's green energy, 3 of the world's top 100 universities, innovators and inventors of the modern world, and yet somehow we can't survive on our own.
You know what the great tragedy of this is, and one of the reasons it might actually be a good idea is that...
Next time I'll pay for your bus fare to come up.
Come on, quick guys, because I want to get to the audience.
One of the great tragedies is actually Scotland had an incredibly proud entrepreneurial history. This is a country of Adam Smith. You know, it seems to have lost that under a very, a very long period of, big state left-wing government.
Let's move back into the audience.
Would rediscover that great tradition. That might be a good thing.
Scott, does that answer your question?
Well, it answers my question, but my question is, you said there's a lot of questions left to be answered, and I think the problem is, I don't understand how you can expect people to turn up and vote yes in a referendum when we're not exactly clear on what an independent Scotland is going to be like, and there's a lot of questions left to be answered, and we've been waiting on it, we've still not got it.
Yeah, probably something that we can't answer in the next 3.5 minutes, sadly, till we disappear off air. So let's try and get around on here from as many people as we can. Up in the top corner there.
Milo, the reason we had so many entrepreneurs back in those days was we were the first country to introduce free education, and now we've reintroduced it. So, by the time the first lot of us to graduate, just watch over the next few years.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that. I'm sure a lot of people enjoyed that moment, yes?
I agree with what Scott said there, because the thing is that you were saying, Hamza, about like the Team GB is not really relevant to the issues, but at the moment, for me, I consider myself political but not party political, and it's the best argument I've seen so far on either side is the fact we did good in the Olympics, because I'm not hearing answers. There's just two sides going at each other and no one's actually telling us what it's going to be like. So
was it good for Great Britain, do you think, to see everyone under the Union flag?
I think it's better for the side that's for us being kept together, definitely, the Olympics on its own, but there's a while for the referendum.
So you're pro-union, you don't want to see...
No, I've not made up my mind because I've not been given any arguments on either side.
OK, Hamza, send a leaflet to that lady.
Milo's suggesting that we lost our entrepreneurial spirit because of big left-wing governments. I would suggest that that's more to do with Westminster governments that have had us under managed decline for decades, followed by tax and spend, also from Westminster. Scotland absolutely can. As Hamza was saying, we are 8.6% of the population. We raise 9.6% of the UK's taxes, but we only get 9.3%. We can absolutely do it.
Thank you very much. Yes. Good point, strong point. Yes. Gentlemen,
Hamza made the point that Scotland has no influence at the top table. It wasn't that long ago that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer of the United Kingdom were both not just Scottish, but Scottish MPs elected by Scottish electors. Scotland does have a seat at the top table, and what the Olympics have showed, that we are better together. Where does Sir Chris Hoy, the flag carrier, the best Olympian, the most proud Olympian in Scotland, train? He trains in Manchester as part of Great Britain. Not as a Scottish athlete, he's supported by UK sports.
Andy Murray trains in Spain. That doesn't mean that we should be part of Spain. I mean,
OK, let's hear from the lady in front of you. Yes, far away.
Oh, hi. The question really is about being patriotic, or are you really thinking about the complexities of what's going on in Scotland? People aren't really discussing. We've not really been told what's going to happen with independence, and for far too many people, it's about being patriotic, and that's not what it's about.
No, it's not.
OK, thank you. 2 quick points here from these 2 ladies.
Yeah, I'm not Scottish, I'm English, but I absolutely believe in democracy, and if the majority of a country wants that, then they should absolutely be given the opportunity to do it.
OK, and yourself?
I agree with the whole referendum, but I think that 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds should have the right to vote in it, because we don't know enough about the independence and what's going to happen, but this is the only chance in our lifetime that we might actually be able to see this.
OK, and a really quick point, the gentleman at the front waving his arms at me wildly.
Yeah. Well, it's more to do with the fact that there are arguments both sides. Scotland could make it alone, Scotland could make it as part of the Union, but ultimately, I'm British, I'm Scottish. You will be taking away a part of my identity.
No, why?
Yeah, okay. Devolved power is fine, but if you become an independent state, you take away my identity as a Brit, because Britain won't exist anymore.
Of course it will.
It won't exist. You want an independent nation, which will be Scotland.
Why should your identity? Why should it be a question of your identity?
Sorry, you're trying to argue away how I feel about being British.
No, I'm sorry.
That's not fair.
What is it that makes you feel British? If it's a case of, look, for some people feeling British is Team GB, great. For some people it's watching EastEnders. For some people it's X Factor. For some people it's that shared identity and the victories through the war. Why should that change because
Okay,
you decide to...
we are out of time. I would love you to continue this debate, but
in Edinburgh, rather than in London.
You've both made your point. I'm sure you can meet up afterwards. Michelle, a couple of really quick points on Twitter.
Yes, we've got some points on Twitter, but what I want to do is just go back to the power bar. Humza, you really seem to be connecting with people at home, and so I think it's only fitting that you have the final word, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Well, no, I just wanted to pick up on the point, I suppose, that 16 and 17-year-olds, young people should absolutely be given a voice. It's not fair that they should be able to fight in wars, that they should be able to pay for national services but have no say in them. So come on, the young people.
OK, Humza, thank you very much for being here. Please welcome comedian Shapiro. Up next, free market campaigner from the right-wing think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs. Ruth Porter is with us. At just 27, he's the youngest SNP MSP, which means he's a Scottish National Party member of the Scottish Parliament. Therefore, he is definitely Scottish. Humza Yousaf is with us tonight. Finally, Catholic journalist and social media commentator Milo Yiannopoulos. But let's move on now and talk about higher education. University applications are down nearly 10% in England, and our exclusive free speech poll shows that 72% of young people believe tuition fees, which triple next month to nearly £9,000, are to blame. Well, no such drop-off here in Scotland, where university education is still free if you're Scottish, not if you're English. But 57% think going to university is worthwhile and the benefits outweigh the costs wherever you live. Well,
given the current economic climate, many young people today are considering the worth of higher education. What did the panel think?
Ruth, let's come to you first on this. Is it worth it?
Well, those two stories.
Formal education is the biggest factor of social mobility, and this matter is a matter, like so many others in this country, about class. What we are saying is that we think that this formal education is only suited to certain people in certain sections of society, and then the question of money comes up. We're in a financial crisis.
Someone has to pay for everyone to go to university.
Listen, I'm not an economist, right? But I'm just thinking, get George Osborne, right? Tip him upside down, give him a little shake, and let all that change roll into the coffers of council estate kids and pay for their education, because they have as much right to go to as people from Eton and Westminster. This is massively an issue about class, in my opinion.
OK. Michelle.
You seem to have someone who's in agreement with you. Robin puts it nicely. She says that surely it's a bad thing if people are academically restricted by cost rather than intellectual ability. Seems to be your point there. And Giacomo said, I learnt practical media skills at Roundhouse London.
Were awesome, and I think they demonstrate really what is central to this, that we're all completely different. And one of the things which is a big shame when it comes to this issue is that we've become obsessed with this idea that somehow going to university is what makes you educated. And I think increasingly that's an incredibly outdated way of looking at education. When you look at the impact of technology, you look at the scope of the media, you look at the changing face of communications, of social media, the way that we access information and the ability that we have to learn, I think it's quite outdated to focus so heavily on university to concentrate on that. But there is still a place, I think, obviously for some people and for certain skills in terms of going to university. But I think, again, you know, we've got a system where there's a massive focus on these standard 3-year, 4-year in Scotland degrees, undergraduate degrees, where you have a massive long summer holidays, a short Christmas, a short Easter, as if somehow that standard format is going to suit every single area. And I think we need much more diversity in the way that universities delivered.
Well, interestingly, your power bar went shooting up to the top during that little monologue there. Meanwhile, Shabby, you were looking slightly nonplussed, I think.
No, I was just imagining a scenario where a young person goes for a job interview and says, I haven't got a degree, but I've spent loads of time on the internet.
But you could understand Ruth's point, though, that there's more than one way to get an education.
I think that is a little bit of a cop-out attitude that we are now having towards education. I think what we're saying is, it's OK, little people who don't have the money or the parents who went to university, you can read other little comic books, perhaps, things that will make you feel like you're more educated. It's such an important thing that we take this issue seriously, because this will go on for generations. We've got to see beyond the financial crisis and see what values we are now instilling in our culture Well, we are saying that only certain people can go to university, because what we are doing then, you see, we have a free healthcare. Healthcare is as important as an education, because there, if you're educated, if you have a degree...
For £20 a term, sorry, then on my media degree, worth a thought.
Okay,
Sure is.
definitely worth a thought. Well, let's talk about this then. The question is of cost, and Shapi saying that everyone needs education. Maybe it's almost the only way, but Nick, you have an example of the fact that perhaps it's not just about going to university, right?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I left school. I was running a business while I was at school. I then went on to university while I was running that business, and then dropped out of university because I was doing a business degree, and most of the things that I felt I was learning at uni, I was learning at a pace that was set by the class. Whereas if I can go out into the real world, run my business and go full steam ahead with it and learn from the mistakes I'm making and from the experiences I'm getting put through, then that's what I was going to do.
I think university is the real world. I think it is the real world, and it's brilliant that you've done what I did. I have a friend who was a musician and went to university, but his band took off, so he left. That's an exception, and brilliant that you're doing so wonderfully, but it is...
Is it everything, though, university? Is it not part of the way of...
It should be offered to everybody for free. You get a 16-year-old that has to make that decision. I know that you have years to pay it off.